Here's some feedback on how to answer the storytelling question for your common module essay. So the question, just to go over it, was storytelling ignites new ideas about the multifaceted nature of human behavior. Discuss this in relation to your prescribed text. Now, there's a couple of key steps that you need to go through to make sure that you answer the question actually given. It's really easy to just try and remember what you prepared for, an introduction, without actually really properly engaging with the question that's being asked. And that's a real danger, because it will always keep you in the sort of 13 to 15 out of 20 range, rather than being able to get those top marks of, 17, 18, 19 out of 20. So let's just have a quick look at this introduction here and just have a look at what's potentially missing. So we've got Arthur Miller's allegorical play, The Crucible, delves into igniting new ideas about the multifaceted nature of human behavior and motivations through discussing dissent, dangers of reputation, and hypocrisy of religion. Now, what is really good about this is that it does include words of the question. So we've got ignite new ideas, multifaceted nature, and it's not just parroting the question. It's not just saying storytelling ignites new ideas about the multifaceted nature of human behavior, full stop, start your answer. Okay, so that's really good. It's kind of been made into like its own sentence using the words. That being said, there's not much being said about what those new, it does say igniting new ideas, about the multifaceted nature of human behavior, but I'm not too sure what that multifaceted nature actually is. I know there's, a difference between behavior and motivations, but I'm not sure what the difference between the behavior and motivations are. So it's like, yes, they're discussing things like dissent and reputation, but I'm not sure what the connection is between this and the behavior and motivations, and therefore the multifaceted nature, and therefore the igniting new ideas. So like, what are those ideas? So we'll go into that a little bit further, but just want to kind of give you an overview to start with. Then Arthur Miller does this through exploring that religious authorities in society, I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, but something, distress in the form of collective hysteria, whilst connections on the McCarthyist era and post-communism. So this was a handwritten trial, so obviously there could be some errors in, or it's difficult to read sometimes, spell it, and grammar could be a little bit off, but basically, like, what is good is there's a mention of McCarthyist era. Yes, there is collective hysteria, but the sentence doesn't read extremely well based on those gaps in like the actual sentence format. So really important in your introduction that it's very, very clear. Markers are going to read the introduction very closely, much more closely than any of the rest of your essay. So the first impressions count. So make sure that the introduction is really clean, really easy to read, very structured and form and grammar and everything. And also topic sentences are really important. Someone's going to read those really, really closely. Not to say that you should throw that out the window for the rest of your paragraphs, but if there's a couple of mistakes here and there, it won't be picked up on as easily. Miller continues to extend this idea through showcasing the dangers that individual cause in Salem are driven by their preservation of reputation in a puritanical society. So I can definitely see bits and pieces here that like are good about, puritanical society and things, but again, it's a little bit hard to read. Lastly, Miller comments on the multifaceted nature of individuals through the hypocrisy of religion, which creates immorality in motivating a reflection of the McCarthyist behavior. So like it just doesn't quite flow. It doesn't quite make sense. I'm not sure exactly, again, what the answer to the question is. I can see the words in there. I can see bits and pieces of words in terms of analysis, but like the flow is kind of missing. So what we want to do is go back right. And the other thing too that's really missing is storytelling. Like that's a really important part of the question. If you don't include that, it's a really easy one to include as well. If you don't include that, you then haven't really fully answered the question. Okay, so let's go back and we're going to go use the formula that is so crucial to actually making sure you can answer questions. So the first thing we want to do is underline the keyword. So we've got storytelling, ignites, and individual keywords, not groups of words, not phrases, individual ones, new ideas about the multifaceted nature of human behavior. All right, discuss Alrighty, so what we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're going to brainstorm for each of these words. The cool thing is, even if they're not using specific terms of the rubric, which obviously here they are, it'll be some sort of like there'll be synonyms of the rubric. And so the more questions you do, basically, the more familiar you'll be with each word and how to address it. So storytelling is just like the play itself, you know, the writing of the story. Okay. It's also like could be fiction, which in this case it is fiction, but it is an allegory. So it is talking about something real in society. Ignites, like brings about. Then we've got new, so like different ideas, notions, maybe values could sort of be in there, like themes. Then we've got multifaceted. All right, so multifaceted is going to be like, yeah, like multidimensional, like it has different sides. But what's more important there is the notion that it's like it's alluding to the inconsistency in motivations and behavior. Okay, which is good that it's sort of been identified here, but it needed a little bit more development. Okay, so if something, yeah, has different angles, then maybe there's an inconsistency. Okay, we'll come back to that. And then we've got nature, so like attributes, human, I think human we get behavior. So behavior is going to be like actions, which again could be inconsistent with motivations. I'm just going to put that in bracket. All right, so after we do the keywords and we think about the synonyms, we've got to then bring it together in terms of looking at this text and what the key arguments are. So this is an allegory. It is making a comment on the McCarthy era and the fact that during that particular era, whilst there was this whole notion that we're trying to protect society, there was a lot of persecution going on where people were basically being arrested and accused of things without due process. Okay, so the democratic system broke down and people were just being accused based on hearsay, which we can then see in the play where it's like, I saw goody blah blah with the devil, and it's like, all right, off with your head, you know, so well, you're going to get hung. So, you know, Arthur Miller's, you know, making a comment on his context using the setting of the Salem witch trials. So obviously history repeats itself as one comment, but more importantly, to go into Arthur Miller's purpose and really understand what he's saying. So yes, he is commenting on the McCarthy era, but what a lot of students miss is that he's telling us that we shouldn't be prescribing to this. We shouldn't be giving into the persecution and the fear mongering that's going on. So what we see then is Proctor, who, even though he's going to be hung, he's like, I'm not going to sacrifice my name, my integrity, just to be safe, which is a very unusual thing to do from a human behavioral standpoint. We are designed for self-preservation. We're supposed to make sure that we're safe, we're alive, we're all these things. But he doesn't do that. He's like, I actually value my integrity and my spirituality and, you know, myself, whatever you want to call it, over my own life, which is a really big deal and something that Miller himself, even in writing this, like he was accused of being a communist, and that really exposed him to dangers in real life. So, you know, he's really practicing what he preaches in the sense that he's like, stand up for your freedom at any cost. Okay, so when we look at the idea of you know, ignites new ideas, like the new ideas we're looking at is that even though an individual may be driven by that desire for safety and unity, and that's what they obviously start off with when they're talking about the theocracy, like establishing that for people in, you know, in Salem, there's this flip side, this inconsistency, this, I suppose, multifaceted notion that we now need to also, in keeping ourselves safe, we need to protect ourselves from external threats, right? And then that creates fear, because if you are then you become a threat, then you need to fear for your life. Okay. So yeah, there's this paradox very much inherent in this whole thing, which I mean is something you probably want to mention as well. Very relevant, and it does sort of link back to that notion of things being multifaceted. It's not simple, it's complex, it's paradoxical. All right, cool. So that gives you an idea of like how to, like what the new ideas are, like how it's multifaceted. And then we want to go into writing an introduction. Now, when you're writing an introduction, after you think about how the words link to your paragraphs, always start with the words of the question in the beginning of your introduction. Don't start writing your own answer and then bring words of the question in later. So as you can see here, there's, oh, I'm going to like start my, you know, you can like you're starting the essay and then bringing the words in, which is still good, better than like not having it, right? But if you want to really push up into those high bands, start with the question itself. Okay, so I've actually written an example and we're going to go through here. All right, so using allegorical storytelling. So there we go, we've got storytelling. Through his play, Arthur Miller's The Crucible ignites new ideas, so we've got that there, about how human behavior that intends to achieve peace and freedom can be multifaceted and inconsistent when exposed to a fear of persecution. So there's a real clarity about what the human behavior is, you know, initially aiming for. Like that is what we want, peace and freedom. But then there's an inconsistency. So that's where it's multifaceted, because once people have a fear, they just throw this out the window. Like, okay, that's it. There's no more peace and we're going to give up our freedom. You just tell us what needs to happen. Oh, that person needs to be killed or jailed. All right, fine, just do it. Right. So there's like a mass hysteria that like, you know, enables the this persecution. As a critique of the McCarthy era, and communist threat, Miller ignites, so coming back to it, ideas about the hypocrisy of religious theocracy and political dogmas. So the religious hypocrisy is obviously Salem, political dogmas is McCarthyism, where the motivations of unity, faith, and safety are contradicted by the collective hysteria that can result from heresy and persecution. So, yes, so that's where the hysteria comes from. It comes from, sorry, not heresy, hearsay and persecution. However, through the characterization of Proctor, and this is a bit that most students leave out, he ultimately uses his storytelling. So Miller ultimately uses his storytelling, back to storytelling again, to ignite new ideas about how human behavior should not be driven and sacrificed by political oppression, questioning the multifaceted nature of human behavior, i.e. our inconsistent behaviors, encouraging his audience to preserve their integrity and morality despite the danger it poses. So that's the last and final piece of looking at this essay, is what is Miller trying to get us to do? It's not just that he's reflecting McCarthyism, it's that he's challenging it and saying we should challenge it as well, even if we are going to be exposed to persecution, you know, in some way. So it's a pretty tall ask, and I mean, he does it himself, which is very impressive. Most people, you know, follow the masses, like we're a collective, you know, but this is where, you know, his storytelling is trying to provoke something. It's trying to say, hey, like, have a look at this other society where we've just let this go on. Look how terrible that is. Look at this guy who, you know, ends up, you know, this good person, moral person, religious person. Yes, he's, you know, done some things wrong, but like, who hasn't? You know, does he really deserve to die just because he's not willing to ironically lie and say that he's done something that he hasn't done? So, you know, he's giving us an insight, and his audience an insight through a different sort of, I suppose, contextual lens, or through that allegorical structure, to kind of look at their own context and go, oh, hold on a second, like maybe we shouldn't be letting this fly, because it's people that support the government. It's people that are sort of going to go along with McCarthyism and go, oh yeah, actually cool, I'm going to participate in this and I'm going to start accusing people and I'm going to be afraid of communism. So, you know, it doesn't matter if there's no due process or, you know, proof that someone is a communist. the accusation alone is enough to condemn them. And he's saying that's just not right and not in alignment with what our actual values are, which is like freedom, democracy, peace, unification, etc. So that, again, back to that inconsistency. So I do have a couple more videos going through different questions on this. And also this is a really good one just to sort of show you, like, just flesh out these ideas a little bit more paragraph by paragraph so you can really make good connections from the question that's being asked to the introduction you write. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not memorize an introduction. You know your ideas, you know your quotes, you know what the text is about. Write your introduction from scratch, because if you try and memorize something and just like slot the words of the question in, it's never going to read as much, as clearly, and flow as well as something that you come up with on the day will, especially obviously once you do lots and lots of practice questions, figuring out how to sort of bring different words in but still have it, you know, really make sense. So practice is really important, and I know it's really scary to not go off something that you've memorized, but you just can't do it if you want to be getting a really top-down response. Okay, so you know your stuff, trust yourself, even if it doesn't sound as polished when you write it out to a new question from scratch as it would if you know, regurgitated something memorized, you'll still get more marks for the one that answers the question than the one that doesn't. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about how to actually approach these questions. And the other thing I really like is going back, and once you do a practice, actually going back and highlighting the key where you've used the keywords, reading it out, making sure that it actually, you know, it actually makes sense. It actually flows. You know, you won't realize until you actually read back on it. Sometimes it doesn't. So then you've got to correct it and give it another go.